Have you ever looked at the sea and felt it looking back? Not with eyes, not with intent, but with memory. A memory older than ours. Older than any story carved into stone or whispered in myth. Something beneath those waves remembers. And sometimes, just sometimes, it forgets to hide. There was once an island. It had a name. It was mapped, logged, seen, charted, even feared. And then it wasn't. Sandy Island. A speck in the vastness of the Coral Sea somewhere between Australia and New Caledonia. Coordinates 19°13, 159°56'E. Once real, now gone. Not eroded, not sunk, erased. Not long ago, you could find it on maps, including those published by the world's most respected scientific institutions. Google Earth marked it. So did maritime charts. It sat like a sentinel in the middle of the sea, a ghost of volcanic birth. Its name a whisper across centuries of exploration. But in 2012, a research vessel named the RV Southern Surveyor sailed to its coordinates and found nothing. No sand, no reef, no rock, no trace. The ocean was deep, over a kilometer, and silent. The water darkened as if trying to conceal a wound. Instruments showed no sign the island had ever been there. No shallow shelf, no crater, just abyss. The researchers on board were confused. They double-checked their equipment, cross-referenced with older maps, searched archival logs. But the more they looked, the more it unraveled. Sandy Island, it turned out, was not just missing. It had never existed, or so we were suddenly told. The world's maps were quietly updated, databases deleted entries, Google Earth removed the feature, and the story was buried under a footnote of cartographic error. But how does an island appear on maps for over a century, only to be dismissed overnight? That is not an error. That is a memory hole. And what makes Sandy Island more than a cartographic curiosity is what it leaves behind. Because stories cling to places, even vanished ones. Old sailors once warned not to go near the region. Ships described compass errors, sudden storms, strange lights. And then there were the disappearances, not of land, but of people. Men who left journals about black stones rising from the deep, about birds that flew in circles without sound, about a fog that didn't roll, it breathed. Some believed the island was cursed, others that it was sacred. But perhaps the truth is simpler. Sandy Island was never meant to be found, and it wasn't the first. There are whispers of others, islands that vanish, reefs that rewrite themselves, land masses that flicker in and out of history like faulty projections on an ancient film reel. What if the ocean doesn't just hide things? What if it forgets them on purpose? Long before satellites and sonar cartographers depended on witness accounts, ship logs, explorers' sketches, celestial readings. Maps weren't just tools, they were stories, and some stories refused to die. The first recorded mention of Sandy Island dates back to 1806 on a chart drawn by the whaling ship Velocity. The crew documented a raised sandbar shallow enough to scrape a hull. They named it Sable Island, which later morphed into Sandy on Admiralty maps. Later surveys by the French, Dutch, and Australians confirmed the landform's existence. It appeared in nautical atlases and global datasets for decades, not as a maybe but as a certainty. And then came the contradictions. In 1979, a French hydrographic expedition noted a discrepancy in the region, no visual confirmation of the island. But their findings were quietly shelved. In the 1980s, the CIA's classified sea shadow program documented the same coordinates during stealth naval trials. Their internal report, later partially leaked, contained only one sentence regarding the island. Silhouette fails to respond to expected reflection. Surface anomaly resembles submerged aperture. Submerged aperture, a phrase that makes no geological sense. But if this was merely deep ocean, why use a language suggesting machinery? By the time the RV Southern Surveyor conducted its 2012 expedition, most commercial maps still listed Sandy Island, which is why the crew was shocked when they arrived and discovered nothing. What followed was a quiet retraction across global institutions. The General Bathymetric Chart of the Ocean's GEBCO removed the entry. So did the United States National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. No press release, no scientific debate, just deletion. But in our age of data trails and digital memory, nothing disappears cleanly. Amateur researchers began comparing pre- and post-2012 satellite data. Several reported pixel anomalies in the area, brief flashes of landmass during infrared passes, sudden noise spikes during microwave imaging. One image captured by NASA's Terra satellite in March 2010 shows a blurry gray shadow roughly the size and shape of Sandy Island surrounded by unusually warm sea temperatures nearly 3 degrees Celsius higher than surrounding waters. Oceanographers dismissed it as cloud artifacts. But clouds don't emit heat from below, which leads to a chilling question. If Sandy Island was removed from view, was it also removed from memory? There's a word for that, damnatio memoriae, an ancient Roman punishment, to erase someone so completely from history that it would be as if they had never lived. But we don't usually damn islands, unless we fear what they might reveal. Tonight we dive deeper into a sea that forgets, into maps that lie, and into a silence that has lasted too long. What if Sandy Island didn't vanish? What if it woke up? The ocean does not give up its dead, nor does it easily surrender its secrets. If Sandy Island never existed, why did so many believe it did? And if it did exist, why is it now so thoroughly gone? These are not idle questions, because belief shapes reality. And for over a century, cartographers, sailors, and scientists believed in Sandy Island, until they were told not to. The record is there, or rather, what's left of it. British Admiralty charts from the late 19th century mark the island's location clearly, with annotations of possible hazard shallow reef. The 1908 Pacific Navigation volume lists it as a low-lying sandbar, 25 miles in circumference, treacherous to small craft. Even as recently as the early 2000s, digital mapping databases like GeoNet and World Vector Shoreline carried the coordinates. Some listed elevations, others marked it as a volcanic islet implying geological activity. So where did that data come from? In truth, no one knows. The official response from mapping agencies was that an error propagated from a misreported sighting in the 19th century. But errors fade, they don't multiply. They don't survive wars, governments, and generations of revisions. They don't show up on satellite composites unless there's something there to show. One of the most curious findings came from a 2005 dataset used in offshore mineral rights mapping by a New Zealand private firm. When scanning the seafloor near Sandy Island's listed coordinates, they recorded a triangular anomaly, elevated ridges forming a symmetrical structure nearly 2.4 kilometers across. The data was archived, and then the company was dissolved 6 months later. No follow-up, no explanation, just a closed door and silence. There's a pattern here, not of conspiracy, but of quiet forgetting. And there are signs, fragments left behind by those who might have seen too much. In 1944, an Australian Navy hydrographer named James Thorne documented what he called an unrecorded shoal northeast of New Caledonia. His logbook entry reads, "Sharp shift in depth from 1,200 meters to 14. Seabed composed of black glassy stone. Magnetic disturbance noted. Crew reports nausea and auditory hallucinations. Recommending further study. No such study was ever commissioned." Thorne's logbook now sits in a sealed archive in Canberra, classified under maritime anomalies, accessible only by special request. It gets stranger. In 1906, a French meteorological balloon, launched from Noumea, drifted off course and transmitted bizarre barometric data over the same region. Readings indicated sudden thermal spikes followed by complete instrument failure. The last image transmitted was a grainy frame showing concentric rings, as if something circular and immense sat just below the water. The balloon's wreckage was never recovered, but the technician who reviewed the telemetry, a man named Jean-Luc Monnet, reportedly suffered a mental breakdown shortly after. He was hospitalized for stress-induced delusion. According to his daughter, who spoke decades later, his final words before institutionalization were, "It saw me." Let's step back. Why would a non-existent island be tied to electromagnetic anomalies, structural ridges missing research vessels, and thermal irregularities? Unless it isn't just an island. Unless it was never just land to begin with. There's another theory, one few dare speak aloud, one that isn't geological or cartographic or technological, but metaphysical. The sea, after all, has always been more than water. To sailors and mystics alike, it's been a veil, a threshold, a keeper of old things, older than humanity, older than the sky itself, some say. What if Sandy Island isn't gone, but closed? A door, perhaps, a prison, or worse, a wound. In Polynesian lore, there are stories of Te Langi Muya, the Isle of Whispers, a forbidden place that rises once every 100 generations and brings with it the dreams of the drowned. Sailors are warned to look away when the sea turns flat as obsidian and the wind stops breathing. In one tale, a fisherman drifts too far north chasing a storm. He finds land black and still. A woman stands at its center, made of glass and salt. She opens her mouth, but no sound comes. Only water. The fisherman returns changed, his skin covered in fine grains of stone. He forgets his language, his family, everything except the island's name, which he repeats until his final breath, Sable. That story comes from 600 years ago, but it echoes, doesn't it? Like a place out of time, a phantom of geography, a riddle we were not meant to solve. And the closer we get, the more reality bends. In the late 1990s, a Japanese oceanographic vessel named Kaiomaru No. 5 reported a spatial distortion in their imaging equipment near the coordinates of Sandy Island. Their side-scan sonar bounced wildly, showing alternating readings of seafloor and airspace as if the vessel was briefly flying. One engineer quit the mission entirely. He later wrote in a cryptic blog post, "We crossed into something, I do not know what, but the sea was wrong there. It moved without moving." What does that mean? We may never know, because no follow-up was ever conducted. And the data, deleted, of course. But deletion is not destruction. Some memories fight to survive. In 2011, a Canadian deep-sea mapper named Clara Voss conducted private LiDAR sweeps over the Coral Sea for unrelated research. When her scans overlapped Sandy Island's listed coordinates, the system glitched. Not once, not twice, but exactly 6 times each glitch showing the same shape. A hexagon. Not a natural form, not volcanic, not tectonic. Just there, appearing, then gone. Like a signature written in code. She submitted her findings to several universities. None responded. But months later, her small research grant was revoked. And the plane she chartered for a follow-up never arrived. Wreckage scattered across open sea. No survivors. No black box recovered. Just one last signal from the aircraft. A garbled transmission, mostly static, except 3 words repeated 3 times. Still beneath us. Still beneath us. Still beneath us. And then silence. It was 3:41 a.m. when Captain Enrique Navarro awoke from a nightmare that didn't feel like a dream. He had been sailing the western edge of the Coral Sea for over 2 decades, a veteran of merchant routes, long-haul oil runs, and deep-water research charters. He knew every current like the lines on his palms, but that night something was off. No wind, no waves, not even the subtle roll of the ocean. The water had gone. Still. Too still. Navarro stepped out onto the bridge of the Mistral Sun and scanned the horizon. His crew slept soundly unaware, but he could feel it in the pit of his stomach. A pressure, like standing just before a thunderclap. He checked the GPS. They were drifting directly over a blank part of the map. Coordinates that, according to the ship's automated log, didn't exist. Not water, not land, just nothing. The radar pinged once, then went dark. In the seconds that followed, every screen on the bridge flickered and died. Backup power snapped on, but only for a moment. Then, everything stopped. The Mistral Sun hung in space in silence, not floating suspended. Navarro later recalled the feeling as like being held between breaths. Then came the sound. Not a roar, not a crash. A hum, low, droning, mechanical yet alive. It rose from beneath the hull, vibrated through every bolt and beam, and then it was gone. Just like that, the systems rebooted. The sea returned, the instruments lit up. Navarro's hands trembled as he checked the logs. The timestamp had skipped forward exactly 7 minutes and 13 seconds. No gap, no drift, just absence. When the crew awoke, no one remembered anything unusual, only Navarro, and he never spoke of it again publicly. But in a private journal found years later by his daughter tucked inside a locked footlocker, he had written a single entry. The ocean is not ours. There is something down there, waiting, watching. Sandy Island is a mystery, but it is not unique. Across the globe in every ocean, there are whispers of places that appear and vanish. Islands seen once logged by explorers, then never again. Sometimes marked on maps for decades, then erased with a single stroke of bureaucratic certainty. Cartographic phantoms. In 1876, the St. Andrew reported sighting a volcanic isle west of Easter Island. Smoke, lava flow, birds circling. But a British survey expedition in 1903 found only open water. The captain noted in frustration, either the world has changed or we have. And then there's Bermeja, an island once visible off the Yucatan Peninsula, charted by the Spanish in the 16th century. It vanished in the 20th. When Mexican authorities sought to reaffirm territorial waters in the 1990s, Bermeja was nowhere to be found. Satellite imagery sonar sweeps nothing. Some say it sank, others believe it never existed. But why then does it appear in 18th century legal maritime records? Why does it show up even faintly in declassified Cold War surveillance maps? Are we to believe these were all just mistakes? Or are we facing something far older and stranger than we're willing to accept? Something that doesn't fit within our systems of measurement, that slips through our understanding of space and time, something that comes and goes according to rules we do not yet grasp. Perhaps we are not mapping the Earth. Perhaps the Earth is mapping us. This brings us back to Sandy Island. Because while it may have vanished in 2012, the truth is, it had already been disappearing for far longer. Emil Katongo, a Tanzanian physicist working with acoustic seabed resonance, ran a private study on anomalous sonar echoes in the Coral Sea in 2007. What he found baffled him. Echoes at Sandy Island's coordinates returned with a signature he could not replicate. Not stone, not coral, not silt, but something dense, uniform, hollow in tone. He described it as a perfect void with skin. When he submitted his findings for peer review, his paper was rejected as methodologically incoherent. Months later, Katongo's home lab was broken into, his equipment was stolen, and he himself disappeared during a field trip to Papua New Guinea in early 2008. His last message sent to a colleague in Switzerland contained only a photo. It showed the ocean flat and unbroken, but in the center of the image, if you looked closely, a shimmer, a faint outline, the ghost of an island. The file name, Doorway Final JPG. That image has never been officially acknowledged, and the hard drive that contained it was reportedly destroyed in a fire. But a backup remained, encrypted, and 2 years later, it appeared anonymously on a darknet forum dedicated to geomagnetic anomalies. That same week, the forum was shut down by unknown agents. It's hard not to ask, why the effort? Why suppress something that is, by all official accounts, not there, unless it is? And someone wants us to stop looking. Because here is where the story turns darker. Not just mystery, but consequences. In 2015, an American survey team aboard the Nautilus Drift was conducting unrelated oceanic sampling when one of their drones malfunctioned. It veered off course and disappeared. The team activated emergency tracking and traced the drone's last signal to the Coral Sea, to a point within 3 nautical miles of Sandy Island's supposed location. They launched a secondary drone to retrieve it. What they found, or rather what they didn't, was chilling. The water became electrically charged. Their sonar scrambled. And on their live video feed for exactly 12 seconds, a shape appeared. Angular, metallic, rising from the deep. Not a rock formation, not an animal, but a structure. Pillared, symmetrical, too precise to be natural. Then static. And the second drone was lost as well. The footage, of course, was confiscated. Officially, they reported equipment failure due to saltwater corrosion. But a whistleblower from the crew speaking under anonymity described the structure as like an underwater cathedral built by something that doesn't believe in God. He claimed the water felt conscious, and the deeper they got, the more they heard it. A low resonance, not a sound exactly, but a message. One that said simply, "Do not return," and they haven't. To this day, the Nautilus Drift team has remained silent. All members signed non-disclosure agreements. The lead investigator retired within 6 months. The logs were sealed, the coordinates blacked out. The official story, a weather-related mission aboard. But those who know, because you don't seal nothing. You don't erase mistakes. You erase secrets. It was somewhere around the 9th minute of raw sonar playback when Dr. Elijah Murrow first heard it. Not a sound in the traditional sense. A pattern. A pulse. Like breathing slow and deliberate, not from any creature, but from the ocean itself. Dr. Murrow, a marine linguist with the Maritime Acoustics Institute in Wellington, was studying underwater resonance anomalies along the Pacific Rim. The dataset had been handed to him through unofficial channels labeled only Project Ghost, Coral Segment. At first, he assumed the waveforms were corrupted random seismic noise. But when he ran the spectrogram again, using a linguistics modeling tool typically reserved for decoding lost languages, something emerged. Repeating intervals, structured silences, a cadence. The waveform resembled no known animal or geological event. Instead, it resembled speech. And not just any speech tonal, layered, like overlapping frequencies stacked vertically. He cross-referenced the pattern with ancient Sumerian cuneiform chants, and then with Gregorian tones, then Polynesian prayer cycles, then finally, out of curiosity, with the Enochian angelic language recorded in the 16th century by John Dee. The result? A 76% acoustic match across segments. That's not a coincidence. But no one would listen. Murrow submitted his findings to both the University of Sydney and the Global Marine Mapping Coalition. They thanked him for his imaginative efforts and advised him to refrain from drawing theological parallels from hydrophonic data. Within a week, his research grant was quietly revoked. His lab access restricted, and the original data file he'd been sent, it disappeared from his device, remotely wiped. He received an email with no sender, no subject line, and a single sentence. You've heard it. Don't make it speak again. What is it about Sandy Island that evokes such controlled fear? Why is this single point in the ocean, this blank square between coordinates, so actively erased? The answer may lie not on the sea, but far below it. Ancient Polynesian oral histories speak of Te Rua o Te Moana, the whole of the sea, a place where the sky once fell, where land appeared in the blink of an eye, and then vanished before the next sunrise. They described it not as a place of gods, but as a doorway, a place the earth opened to itself. It is said that navigators were warned never to sail there after dark, not because of storms, but because the water there could remember your name. And in the event that it did, you would never come back. These tales were dismissed by early European cartographers as myth. But in 1841, Captain Henri Duforge, a French naval explorer, recorded seeing a sudden island just west of New Caledonia, unmarked, uninhabited, and ringed with black sand. He called it Ile d'Oubli, Island of Forgetting. He claimed the crew who walked upon it who could no longer recall how long they had been there, or even their own names. Duforge's ship log ends abruptly 2 entries later. His final word: the island is not a place, it's a decision, and we've made it. The ship was later found adrift, its decks empty. No bodies, no signs of struggle. Every navigational tool magnetized into uselessness. And where was the ship found? Floating just off the coordinates of Sandy Island. Perhaps it's no coincidence that the name Sandy Island appears for the first time not in naval records, but in a handwritten note from the Cambridge Occult Library circa 1890. A map annotated in Latin with one chilling phrase: Terra transire, non redibit. Land crossed, none return. By the early 20th century, the name began appearing in charts: French, German, Japanese, American. Each mapping the island slightly differently, as if no two saw it the same way. Was it moving? Shifting, reacting. And then in 1974, the name was quietly removed from the United Nations World Oceanic Atlas. No public explanation, just silence. And yet ships kept seeing it. Pilots reported small landforms where there should be only sea. Weather satellites picked up irregularities in surface reflection. And in 1983, a Soviet cosmonaut aboard Salyut 7 mentioned in his private journal, "Today I saw a flicker in the blue, an island that blinked at me. When I looked again, it was gone." Islands aren't supposed to blink, but maybe this one does. Maybe it's not land at all, but memory. A place that remembers being seen and chooses when to be visible. That would explain the inconsistencies. the shifting sizes, the flickering sonar. It would explain the silence and the fear, because if something chooses when to be seen, it can also choose when to disappear. Not just itself, but us. There is a word in Maoringaro. It means vanished, but not simply gone. It means gone in such a way that it cannot be found again. Not lost, erased. We must consider, what if Sandy Island didn't vanish? What if we were pushed away? What if there are rules to presence and Sandy Island broke them or enforced them? Geologists point out that volcanic islands can subside rapidly, but not without a trace, not without sediment, not without debris. And yet no expedition has recovered a single rock from its alleged location. Only anomalies, only absence. Absence that behaves like presence. That acts like it wants to be found until you try. Perhaps it is the last remnant of something far older, something pre-human. An echo of an epoch when the Earth's skin was thinner and the things beneath it were louder. Some say it's a vent for magnetic polarity. Others call it a mirrored node of consciousness, a place where Earth dreams outward. But maybe it is neither. Maybe it is watching, waiting for a time to rise again, like a thought half remembered, a name on the tip of the world's tongue, or like a warning spoken only once, and then withdrawn. There are islands that appear on no maps, but Sandy Island is different because it did appear, over and over, in logs, in charts, in satellite passes and ship logs and traveler testimonies, only to be told over and over that it was never there. This isn't a case of a mythical landmass dreamed up by sailors or fabricated by storytellers. It's something worse, a reality that was, and then was told not to be. Consider the case of the SS Wycliffe, a British cargo vessel en route from Brisbane to Papeete in 1959. On the third night of its journey, the ship veered several kilometers off course due to an unexpected shift in magnetic readings. That night, the lookout reported land in the distance, dark low with no sign of structures. The captain, Robert Ayton, marked it as uncharted islet, black sand in the ship's log. 3 hours later, the ship's sonar began to malfunction. Compass readings spun violently, and the radar screen filled with white static. At 4:14 a.m., the engine stalled and the vessel drifted silently for nearly 2 hours. When the power returned, the islet was gone. Only open sea remained. And when they arrived in Papeete, the ship's entire navigational archive had been mysteriously magnetized, unreadable. Even the paper records had become unreadable, the ink oddly smudged in exact circular patterns, as if the pages had been spun rapidly beneath a heavy magnetic field. The British Admiralty investigated. Their conclusion, atmospheric anomaly, no island present. But in the private letters of First Mate Wallace Crick, one line stood out. The island, I swear it was watching us. Islands don't watch, do they? But that phrase, it was watching us, returns again and again in whispered reports from navigators, researchers, even military personnel. In 2001, a U.S. surveillance sub conducting deep-sea testing near the Coral Sea sent a shortwave transmission that triggered a near-immediate blackout of its communications system. The transcript, declassified in 2020, was brief and chilling. We found it. Sandy isn't gone. It's alive. The crew of that sub was retrieved under heavy secrecy. They have never spoken publicly, but leaked documents hint at something else. Not an island, not even a landmass, but a structure. Geometric, massive, and not made of stone. Material samples, if they exist, have never been published. But one internal memo reads, composition is unknown. Not volcanic, not coral, no organic trace. Surface smooth, reflective. Resembles obsidian but heavier. Emits low-frequency resonance. That resonance, once mapped against acoustic templates, revealed harmonic patterns similar to those found in Mayan temple chambers. More than coincidence, or something much older. In 2013, a French deep ocean diver named Lucien Morel went missing during an unsanctioned dive off the northwest of New Caledonia. He had been chasing rumors from local fishermen who described a shimmering shadow beneath the sea. He was last seen descending alone into a trench that shouldn't have been there at coordinates disturbingly close to where Sandy Island is sometimes reported. His diving cam, recovered weeks later, contained only one usable frame. It shows a silhouette, immense, angular, unnatural, stretching across the seabed. And above it, not water, not rock, but something like a doorway, its edges glowing faintly. Its center perfectly black. Black not like darkness. Black like absence. an absence that stared back. This image was sent anonymously to a researcher in Oslo. It was posted online for less than an hour before being taken down by requests from international security agents. But some who saw it never forgot. One commenter, whose account has since vanished, wrote simply, "It's the bottom of something, not the top." And that comment changed everything. What if Sandy Island isn't land at all? What if it's the roof of a thing buried below? An ancient capstone, a seal, something never meant to be opened. Or something that was opened once and then covered again. Suddenly, all the suppression makes sense. The satellite images that blur without cause. The conflicting sonar returns. The vanishing funding for independent marine research. Because maybe Sandy Island wasn't supposed to exist. And those who found it found something else entirely. There's a concept in Tibetan Buddhism known as a tulku, a person who reincarnates not into a new body but into a place. An island, a mountain, a stone. What if some memories don't live in minds? But in geography, what if Sandy Island remembers something or is something? A guardian, a beacon, or worse, a prison. And in that case, what happens if it wakes? Geologists often dismiss stories of vanishing islands as tectonic illusion, but such collapses leave tremors. Sandy Island left none. Instead, it left whispers. Even the New Caledonian natives speak of it only in hushed tones. They call it Vanu Raka, the island of the final echo. It's said that when a person nears the island's last known location, their dreams change. They see stone stairways underwater, voices calling in languages no one knows, and above all, a rising hum, a resonance so low it vibrates their bones. These aren't dreams, they say, they're invitations. And once you accept, the sea stops letting you go. Durkailan Sundari, an ethnographer from Indonesia, interviewed 3 separate sailors from different islands who all described the same recurring dream after passing near the coordinates. A dream of walking up into the ocean, not down into it, of the water parting like curtains, of dry stone beneath their feet, and of hearing a name not theirs whispered by thousands of unseen voices. The name always the same, Raka. No known language holds that word, but in a nearly forgotten Aramaic dialect, Raka is a curse. It means empty one, or he who should not be named. Are we closer to finding Sandy Island, or are we closer to waking Raka? The distinction may soon stop mattering, because some say the island is returning. The tides are shifting, the maps are warming, and the silence is thinning. The coordinates once etched into colonial sea charts are now nothing but numbers that invoke unease. 1900, 159 day. Somewhere out there where the water runs deep and unnaturally still, the silence is too heavy to be empty. Sailors avoid the area. Those who pass through speak of dead zones, places where compasses falter, where birds fall silent and engines stall for no known reason. Not broken, just paused, as if time itself dips below the waves and forgets to rise again. In 1987, a classified oceanic survey conducted by an Australian naval research team picked up a sonar anomaly resembling a vertical column several meters wide, rising nearly 500 meters from the ocean floor. It wasn't coral, it wasn't rock. Its sides were too smooth, too perfect. Attempts to triangulate it using submersibles failed. The object seemed to vanish every time it was approached, and yet its echo remained. On the 3rd expedition, something unexpected happened. One of the drones lost during the dive was recovered days later on a beach in Vanuatu, some 200 kilometers away. The camera on the drone was cracked, but one frame had survived. It was blurry, obscured, but unmistakable. A circular object, massive, embedded deep into the column. Its surface carved with strange symbols, sharp, concentric, repeating. Not random, patterned. Mathematicians who analyzed the shape noted recurring prime number sequences. Some believed it to be ancient astronomical encoding. Others said it looked like a vault seal. But one archaeolinguist made a darker connection. She identified the shapes as shockingly similar to glyphs found in a forbidden Sumerian tablet, one recovered in 1910 but never displayed to the public. The tablet speaks of a mouth beneath the sea, a place where the stars sleep until the false moon rises, a riddle, or a warning, a sealed mechanism beneath the sea, built long before known civilizations ever sailed those waters, and possibly older than humanity itself. In 2009, a strange atmospheric event occurred over the Coral Sea. NASA detected an unexpected spike in stratospheric ionization directly above the former coordinates of Sandy Island. There was no solar flare, no known magnetic storm, and yet a ripple of heat light and electromagnetic interference pulsed outward for nearly 90 seconds. Satellites caught only fragments of data, but one camera, a weather probe launched by Japan's Himawari program, captured a curious image. It showed a faint outline of a shape rising through the ocean's surface. Not land, a shadow. Vast, angular, moving, and then gone. The image was pulled from public access within hours, but a whistleblower leaked it online where it was dissected by digital analysts and anomaly hunters. What they found shocked them. The shadow had corners, edges too straight to be natural, and a central cavity shaped like a doorway. Again, that word, doorway. It keeps returning, as if the ocean is holding shut a door that once opened, and now strains against its hinges. In 2015, French cryptographer Lionel Barrette, who had spent over 2 decades studying cartographic anomalies, claimed in an obscure journal that Sandy Island didn't disappear. He wrote, "It folded like a page turned the wrong way." His theory was based on topological geometry, the idea that dimensions can twist and reconfigure under immense energy strain. He proposed that Sandy Island might exist in a folded overlay of reality, not gone, just bent out of phase, accessible only when the fold thins or something pushes through. Mainstream scientists dismissed him, but 3 months later, Barrett vanished. No trace, no known travel. His apartment left untouched except for one thing: his chalkboard where he'd written in frantic scrawl over and over, "The fold is waking." That same year, deep-sea divers off the coast of New Caledonia reported hearing strange vibrations underwater. Not mechanical, not natural, more like a hum, a tone that spoke to the bones as one diver described it. Recordings were captured, a low frequency pulsing rhythmically at intervals, and embedded within it, a subharmonic oscillation mathematically consistent with speech cadence. Not human, but deliberate, language-like. When run through linguistic pattern software, the translation modules glitched, then produced a single word: open. This was not coincidence. It couldn't be. But what is it then? A message, a command, a warning, or an invitation? The idea that a structure beneath the sea might be speaking is unsettling. But what if it isn't speaking to us? What if it's speaking through us? A pattern emerged in the following years. People living on Pacific islands near the coordinates began reporting odd dreams, visions of a great structure submerged alive and humming with light. Children drew symbols they couldn't explain. Elders spoke of long-forgotten stories returning. And one woman, a linguist in the Solomon Islands, claimed to hear voices whispering in tides, speaking not to the ears, but inside the skull. The messages were always brief, always the same. It is not gone, it remembers. Do not unseal. But something is pressing from beneath, a shifting, a tension. And with every passing year, the waters grow more restless. Seismologists have reported subtle tremors in the region, too rhythmic to be tectonic, yet too deep for volcanic explanation. Almost like breathing, in, out, slow, vast. And with each pulse, the fold thins. Back on the surface, nations quietly monitor the coordinates. Unmarked ships come and go. No lights, no flags, no answers. What are they watching? Or what are they waiting for? Because if Sandy Island is a door and something knocks, who or what will open it? And will we recognize the world once it does? There's a phenomenon rarely discussed outside classified reports and forgotten mariner tales. Phantom islands, cartographic mirages, land masses that appear on maps for decades, sometimes centuries, only to vanish without a trace. They're not mistakes. They're not figments of old sailors' imaginations. They're relics, clues, sometimes warnings. From the Phantom Island of High Brazil, said to appear once every 7 years west of Ireland, to the enigmatic Isle of Buss in the Arctic Ocean, these vanishing lands are often marked by the same traits. They are seen, then lost, and always remembered. But Sandy Island isn't just remembered, it's documented. That's what makes it different. That's what makes it dangerous. Multiple ships recorded landfall, survey data was collected, Even satellite overlays prior to 2012 clearly showed a landmass in the Coral Sea. And now deleted, not just removed, erased, whitewashed from global satellite imagery, redacted from public databases, rectified in digital atlases overnight. How? By whom? And most of all, why? The answer may lie not in modern navigation, but in something ancient. A 14th century manuscript housed in Prague's Strahov Monastery contains a curious illustration. Drawn in faded ink and iron oxide, it shows a crude map of the southern oceans, impossibly accurate for its time. But there near the equator is a scribbled mark beside what looks like a small island. In Latin, a single word is written, obscura, the dark one, and underneath it, custoditur sub aquis donec tempus clodatur. It is kept beneath the waters until the end of time closes, a poetic flourish, or a hidden directive. When the manuscript was translated in 1932 by Czech historian Bohumil Vrana, he dismissed the reference as religious allegory. But in the margins of his notes, barely legible, he scribbled something chilling. The description matches the fisherman's tale from the Melanesian scrolls. That tale, now largely forgotten, was an oral tradition passed among indigenous navigators in the Pacific. It spoke of a floating stone isle that sank itself to avoid being chained by the sky spirits. A place where the stars feared to shine. A place that would rise only when the tide of forgetting was full. Forgetfulness. Erasure. The island wasn't destroyed. It hid, and it may not be the only one. Satellite imaging errors across the Coral Sea began rising dramatically between 2006 and 2011. Not blank spots, but refractions. Images distorted at certain wavelengths. Contours blurred not by water, but by interference. As if something below the surface was masking itself. The question is no longer whether Sandy Island existed. The question is what forced it into hiding, and what happens when it no longer wants to hide. In 2017, a deep-sea cable maintenance crew accidentally dropped a sonar pod over what used to be Sandy Island's exact location. The signal it returned was anomalous. A flat plateau, roughly 24 square kilometers, just 30 meters below the surface. But what shocked the engineers was what wasn't there. No coral, no sediment, no marine growth. It was clean, unnaturally so, as if something had scrubbed it, wiped the seabed bare. When divers were dispatched, their equipment malfunctioned within minutes. Cameras glitched, lights dimmed, and one diver reported a moment of complete silence, not the usual hush of deep water, but a total absence of sound. Even his own heartbeat vanished. Then came the pressure, like a hand pressing on his chest from inside. He resurfaced, screaming, disoriented, eyes wide, whispering only two words, "It's watching." After that mission, the project was shut down. The crew sworn to silence, and the incident quietly buried beneath bureaucratic mislabeling. But a report leaked years later described a final note logged by one of the sonar analysts. It read, "There's something geometrically perfect down there. Either nature has a sense of humor, or someone built that place. Who, when, and more chillingly, why, some point to ancient civilizations lost beneath the waves. Lemuria, Mu, even pre-Diluvian structures erased by cataclysm. Others speak of something older, not human, not terrestrial, not dead." In 2019, amateur radio operators in the Philippines picked up a series of deep-sea acoustic pulses. They were rhythmic, purposeful. At first, they were believed to be geological, but when translated into audio and slowed down, the pattern resembled a sequence. 3 pulses, then 5, then 8, then 13. The Fibonacci sequence, nature's spiral. The code of life and of design, the pulses were traced back to the Coral Sea, exactly 1.3 kilometers north of Sandy Island's last recorded position. Coincidence or activation? A call and response. It wasn't long before others started noticing things. Fishermen reported lights below the water, pale blue, moving in impossible straight lines. Pilots flying over the region reported brief instrument failure, with artificial horizons and cockpits rotating 90 degrees before snapping back. But most telling were the dreams. People across the South Pacific, unconnected, unaware, started reporting the same image in sleep. A stairway made of black stone, descending into a glowing cavern, a voice echoing from below. Not loud, but endless. Calling one word, return. But return to what and at what cost? By early 2020, independent researchers began investigating the whispers surrounding Sandy Island again, but not from the ocean. They turned to the sky, specifically to the archives of spy satellite data from the 1960s, declassified through the U.S. Corona Project. These were some of the earliest space-based surveillance images ever taken, crude, grainy, but far-reaching. Among hundreds of blurred frames, one photo stood out. Frame number CS23-1378, timestamp July 29, 1966. Centered in the middle of an empty stretch of the Coral Sea was a dark mass. Not a ship, not cloud cover, not distortion. The coordinates matched Sandy Island. But here's what made it chilling. The image also revealed three parallel structures stretching from the central mass downwards like ribs beneath flesh. Perfectly symmetrical, evenly spaced, suggesting architecture, not geology. A French hydrologist named Marcelin Dupré, who reviewed the image for a documentary in 2021, made a comment that was quickly cut from the final release. He said, "That formation is not coral, it's engineered, and it's not above the seabed, it's beneath it." But the footage leaked. For a few days, the still frame circulated in obscure maritime forums, until inexplicably, almost every post referencing the image was removed. The accounts suspended. The image, it didn't matter. The ripples had begun. A new wave of questions surged, not about the island, but what lies beneath where the island once stood. That's when the older stories resurfaced. Not myths, not sailors' tales, but maritime incident reports. One in particular, filed in 1907 by the crew of the Dutch steamship Oosterdam, told of a terrifying night. The ship had passed near the coordinates of Sandy Island in calm weather when, without warning, the sea beneath them turned black. The log described the water as thick, sluggish, almost oily. Instruments failed, compass needles spun like panicked insects. And then came the sound. A low hum, not heard felt. Like a vibration in the bone. It lasted 7 minutes. When it stopped, the water returned to blue. But 5 crew members had collapsed on the deck, foaming at the mouth. 2 never regained consciousness. At the time, the incident was blamed on spoiled rum and hysteria. But a surviving entry in the captain's journal included a sketch. It showed a strange symbol reportedly seen floating beneath the water, glowing faintly. 3 concentric rings, and in the center, a single vertical line, nearly identical to a symbol etched onto a stone fragment discovered on Easter Island in 1868. That stone, now housed in the basement of a private archive in Lisbon, was never decoded, its language unknown, its origin undocumented. But here's what ties it all together. In 22, a cryptographer named Lucien Abel, using AI-enhanced pattern recognition, cross-referenced the symbol with the fragments of Proto-Sumerian cuneiform found in Eridu, the oldest known city in Mesopotamia. The translation, gate, not door, not tomb, not monument. Gate. The implication was terrifying. Not just a place, but a threshold. To what and why was it submerged? Some point to the hypothesis of tectonic memory, the idea that certain places on Earth are prone to anomalies not due to geologic activity, but because of what was once placed there long before human history began. A fringe theory, maybe. But how else do you explain the radio pulses, the erased data, the naval silence? Why does every investigation into Sandy Island result in a quiet, sudden end? Why are explorers discouraged, redirected, or, in one case, disappear? In 23, Australian diver Ronan Blake and his 2-person team attempted an unauthorized survey of the region using a modified submersible. They launched at dawn. At 10:14 a.m., they radioed a simple message, descending. That was the last transmission. Search and rescue recovered only the empty boat floating adrift, with the coordinates still locked on Sandy Island. No sign of the submersible, no debris. Only one item remained aboard, a notebook belonging to Ronan. Inside, scribbled hastily across multiple pages, was a single phrase repeated over and over. It opened. The phrase "it opened" echoed louder than any sonar. It was scrawled with a shaking hand, repeated dozens of times. Some letters smeared, others cut into the page so deeply that the paper tore. The handwriting degraded with each line. The first entries neat, by the end erratic, as if written in darkness or panic. And then silence. What exactly had opened? A trench, a cave, a gateway, or something worse? a memory. Because in the months that followed, strange things began happening, not just in the Coral Sea, but in people's minds. Those who investigated the island's coordinates, whether through academic research, satellite scans, or oceanic records, began reporting vivid dreams. But not dreams in the usual sense. These were shared visions. Researchers on different continents, unaware of each other's work, described the same image: a black spire, jutting out of the ocean like the tooth of something buried, wrapped in rusted chains covered in moss and coral, but unmistakably unnatural. In every vision, the spire whispers, not in words, but in emotions: dread, curiosity, longing, as if something beneath it missed being remembered, as if it had waited too long. One vision reported by a linguist in Norway included a strange phrase heard in a forgotten tongue. When translated phonetically, it read, "We built it to forget, but it remembers us still." Who is we, and what did they try to bury? The whispers don't end with dreams. In March 2024, a yacht passing through the Coral Sea reported a loss of time. Not engine failure, not GPS malfunction, actual missing hours. Their onboard logs, synced with satellite time, showed a gap 3 hours and 46 minutes with no explanation. They didn't sleep. They didn't black out. They simply didn't exist during that window. And when they regained awareness, the sea was wrong. Still, utterly still. No waves, no wind, no birds. One crew member described it as being inside a painting that had stopped breathing. When the footage was recovered from their deck cam, it showed static visual snow, but in the last few frames, something emerged. A silhouette just at the edge of visibility. Not a ship, not an island. A figure. Tall, thin, standing on the water, facing them. And then it was gone. No wake, no trace, no timestamp. The image was reviewed by multiple labs. All concluded the same: the figure was not edited. But no one could explain what it was, or how it stood there. That's when a retired Navy signal analyst came forward anonymously. He claimed to have been stationed on a reconnaissance vessel in 1985 that passed near the same coordinates. They weren't supposed to stop. They were ordered to observe, then leave. But something scrambled their radar, forced them to drop anchor. He described a tone, a low-frequency hum, not mechanical, but organic. Like a whale's call, but angrier. And then the water began to ripple in precise concentric circles. No wind, no movement, just ripples, expanding endlessly without source. Then the ripples froze as if time had stopped, and for a brief moment the sea reflected nothing. Not the stars, not the moon, not the ship, just black. He never saw what came next. He only remembered waking in his bunk, with blood running from both ears. He was discharged days later. Medical anomaly, they said, but he knew what it really was. He called it a place the ocean tries to forget, but the sky keeps watching. That line never left him. And neither did the image of something beneath the ship. He wouldn't describe it, only that it had no eyes, but saw everything. If it sounds impossible, perhaps that's the point. Because not all truths were meant for the surface. Some were meant to remain submerged, like a wound the world never fully healed. In the archives of the Royal Navy, buried deep in a collection of Cold War-era sonar scans, there exists a map. Dated June 3, 1961, marked Classified Level 3, Naval Intelligence only. This map outlines the Coral Sea region in remarkable detail. But what draws attention isn't what's labeled. It's what's been scratched out. At coordinates roughly 1922 DGS, 159.93 DG, the very same once attributed to Sandy Island, the map bears a violent etching, as if someone tried to erase a presence, not with ink, but with fury. The ink there is smudged, the paper scorched, and in faint pencil beneath the scorched mark, a single word remains: nous, French for we, or Greek from the philosophical tradition, meaning mind or divine intellect. Was this the last note from a cartographer who saw too much? Or was it something else, a warning to posterity that this place was not just land, that it was aware? In 1907, a French ship, the Beaulieu, passed through the area during a routine climate monitoring expedition. On board was a linguist named Claire Vigent, who was studying maritime dialects and how language shifted among island communities. She never made it home. The ship returned without her. The official report claimed she fell overboard during a storm, but the ship's log indicated clear skies and calm water that day. One crewman later confessed under sedation that Claire had begun speaking a different language the night before her disappearance. Not French, not English, not Polynesian. Something ancient, something rhythmic and pulsing like a chant. The words were written phonetically in her journal. When translated decades later by modern linguists, the passage roughly meant, "The island is not dead, it is dreaming, and the dream is almost over." Was she reciting channeling, or had the island spoken through her? More disturbing still was what they found in her cabin, a hand-drawn sketch of what appeared to be a spiral structure descending into the sea like a funnel of stone steps, each marked with runes. One rune matched those later found on a megalithic slab recovered from beneath Lake Baikal in Siberia, a place that also has legends of disappearing islands and soundless drownings. Coincidence or connection? When Russian archaeologist Elena Vostrikov saw both the sketch and the slab, her only words were, they were not separate places, they were chapters of the same story, a story that spans oceans, and maybe eras. Some believe that Sandy Island was not just land, but a mechanism, an anchor, a lock, a prison, or worse, a beacon, a signal that something once tethered there has since broken free. Which brings us to the seismic event of September 18th, 2024. An unmapped tremor registered by deep ocean sensors placed by NOAA erupted from the Coral Sea Basin, magnitude 6.4, but oddly non-directional. Seismic waves usually travel outward in predictable lines. This wave spread in a circle equally in every direction, as if something beneath had exhaled. And in that moment, multiple marine observatories picked up a new anomaly. Frequency 37H, a low resonating tone, not geologic, not man-made. Recorded only once before in 1997 by the U.S. National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. Back then they called it the bloop, and it came from near Antarctica. Now it had returned, but clearer, purer, and embedded in its frequency, according to sound engineer Kaito Ren, was pattern structure. Not just tone, but code. He likened it to whale song, but refined, consistent, and strangely melodic. When transposed into audio waves visible to the eye, it formed a shape, a spiral. Just like the one in Claire Vigien's notebook, just like the one carved under Lake Baikal, a spiral, descending, calling. This is where the final piece of the puzzle begins to shift, because while the island may have vanished from sight, the story has not ended. In fact, it may only be beginning. In the early morning hours of October 3rd, 2024, a research drone launched from a Japanese exploration vessel picked up a thermal anomaly in the Coral Sea. It wasn't hot. It was cold. Colder than the surrounding water by several degrees, enough to suggest the presence of a vertical shaft plunging into the earth through which colder ancient layers of the ocean were seeping upward. The drone descended. At 70 meters, it caught the first glimpse. Not rock, not coral, stone. Carved, angular, etched. A ring, carved into the ocean floor, perfectly symmetrical, wide as a football field, with symbols that weren't eroded by time but seemed freshly cut, as if they'd been preserved or rewritten. The symbols matched no known language, but something about them felt familiar. One of the researchers, linguist Takashi Morimoto, claimed they looked like geometric inversions of characters found in Sumerian tablets, like someone had taken ancient Mesopotamian cuneiform and turned it inside out. The drone's feed went dark moments later, not because it lost power, because it encountered interference. A wave of magnetic distortion so powerful it fried the sensors, wiped the hard drives, and scrambled the ship's navigational systems. They called it the breath. It came in a pulse, then vanished. And so did the ring. Gone. When they returned days later with backup equipment, there was nothing. No ring, no anomaly, just flat ocean floor. Almost as if the ocean had blinked and erased what had been revealed. One sailor on the expedition later told a Japanese news outlet, anonymously, "The sea, it's not empty, it just forgets faster than we do." That line struck a chord with independent researcher Dr. Emilia Sorensen, a Danish historian who had been following anomalies in the Coral Sea for over a decade. She compiled the testimonies, the sonar scans, the linguistic fragments, and came to a bold conclusion. Sandy Island wasn't lost. It was sacrificed, deliberately erased from reality by a force or intelligence that had been buried for millennia. Her theory that the island had been the capstone of an ancient mechanism, a kind of planetary seal, an anchor not just of land, but of memory itself. And when that seal eroded either through time or deliberate meddling, the mechanisms beneath woke up. Dr. Sorensen's research points to ancient Polynesian myths, particularly those of Nan Madol, the mysterious city built atop coral reefs in the Pacific, constructed from massive basalt stones. Locals believe it was built not by men but by spirits. And beneath Nan Madol, there are legends of the breathless tomb, a chamber said to lie beneath the sea, forbidden to enter, where time does not move and names are unspoken. Sorensen believes Sandy Island was once part of a triangular alignment, a trinity of anchors across the Pacific. Nan Madol to the northwest, Sandy Island in the center, and a sunken formation off the coast of Easter Island to the southeast. Each point part of a grid, each holding back something older than civilization, older than language. And whatever it was beginning to stir. The phenomenon escalated in January 2025. 3 separate satellites tasked with weather surveillance over the Coral Sea malfunctioned simultaneously. Each one suffered from what engineers call data inversion. Their sensors began reading opposite values, heat signatures, as cold gravity, as reverse time, as fluctuating. For nearly 7 minutes, the entire region became a blind spot in the sky. When the satellites recovered, the only image transmitted was this, a spiral, burned faintly into the ocean's surface, visible only in infrared. It dissipated within an hour, but its coordinates matched exactly with the center of the former Sandy Island. People began to notice. Reddit threads exploded. Amateur astronomers and marine hobbyists began piecing together fragments, photos from the 1950s newspaper clippings, missing map editions, testimonies from seafarers and forgotten radio logs. They started calling it the Eye, a name that spread like wildfire through conspiracy forums. Some said it was a portal, others a wound. A few more extreme believed it was alive. But one thing was becoming clearer. Sandy Island had never been gone. It had simply shifted sideways from memory downward through time, somewhere beneath the fold. And now something was pulling it back. In the forgotten libraries of Lisbon, buried beneath layers of dust and ash from centuries of empire, there is a sea chart known as the Carta Esquecida, the forgotten map. Drawn in 1519, it predates most European expeditions into the Pacific. It's marked with familiar coastlines, Australia, Papua New Guinea, but there in the dead center of the Coral Sea is something else, a landmass, not labeled, not detailed, just outlined. A darkened silhouette of an island with no name. Surrounding it are strange annotations in Latin. One of them reads Insula non responde. The island does not answer. Scholars believe it was dismissed as metaphor, a poetic warning against storms or reefs. But what if it wasn't? What if someone had already encountered Sandy Island and found it unreachable not by ship, but by understanding? A fragment of a report dated October 8, 1761 was discovered in the archives of the Royal Society in London. It came from a merchant ship, the Ardent Swan, returning from the Dutch East Indies. The log notes an unusual event. Around the 11th hour, a fog, not of sea nor of sky, enveloped us. The compass failed. Birds cried from nowhere. The men saw land ahead, yet when we approached, it bent away from us like a mirage made of shadow. Then there was silence. We lost 2 men that night, and not to waves. They walked into the fog and never returned. This was nearly a century before Sandy Island was first charted, and already its legend had teeth. The notion that an island might resist observation, appear when it wants and vanish when it chooses, echoes indigenous myths from across Oceania. In Maori tradition, there is the story of Te Motuhuna, the hidden island. Said to rise only in times of great spiritual imbalance or cosmic alignment, Te Motuhuna would drift through sea and time like a ghost made of stone. But it wasn't just a place, it was a test. Those who saw it were changed. Some returned speaking in strange tongues, others with no memory at all. A few did not return. When questioned, elders would only whisper, "It appears to the ones who need to be warned." And that idea, a conscious island one that appears as a message, is what brings us to the darkest piece of this puzzle. In early February 2025, a freelance diver named Johan Malek from Indonesia set out with a drone submersible to test new equipment near the Coral Sea. He wasn't looking for Sandy Island. He didn't believe in it. But at 3:41 p.m., his drone's camera caught something strange. Stone steps, not coral, not volcanic shelf, but perfectly carved steps spiraling downward encrusted with sea growth, but undeniably symmetrical. Before the footage cut out, 3 frames remained. Each showed a piece of a wall smooth and possibly old and covered in pictographs. One resembled a hand with an eye in its palm, another a star with roots descending into it, the third a figure standing alone, arms raised to a hole in the sky. Johan's surface shaken. He uploaded the footage briefly to a small, private forum before being shut down by unknown parties. His last message on record: "The water is older than we thought, and it remembers everything." The footage leaked inevitably. It was analyzed by Dr. Luis Ramon, a symbologist from Spain, who confirmed that the hand with eye symbol exactly matched carvings found in Göbekli Tepe, the 12,000-year-old megalithic site in modern-day Turkey. Thousands of miles apart, thousands of years between. Same mark, same shape, same implication. Not a culture, a message, a mark of warning or ownership. Because wherever that symbol appears in Turkey in the Andes, in underwater ruins off Japan's Yonaguni coast, one thing follows: disappearance, not of people, of places. If this is the island's purpose, a gate, a seal, a mirror for something ancient and cosmic, then what happens if that purpose is ending? If the seals are breaking? In late February, a team of astronomers from Chile recorded a gravitational flutter, a minor shift in local space-time curvature, centered not in space, but in the Coral Sea. An event with no cause. No quake, no mass displacement, no tectonic rupture. Just a fold in the planet's fabric, like something was moving underneath. Or awakening. They dubbed it Event Baru X Sandy. It was dismissed publicly as data error. Privately, it triggered a black-level alert to 5 global defense agencies. The report remains classified, but one of the physicists involved anonymously said this: "We thought we were mapping a planet. We were wrong. Some things are not meant to be mapped. Some things are only meant to be left alone." There is a legend from the Trobriand Islands, a whisper passed down in the rhythm of drums and the lull of tides. It speaks of the godstone that floats but sinks, an island that appears only to those who hear its name in dreams, one that promises knowledge but leaves silence in its wake. They call it Kava Olu, and they say it vanished long ago, devoured by a breathless god who sleeps beneath the water. No historian ever took the tale seriously, until a ship bearing the same name, Kava Olu, was discovered wrecked along the Solomon Trench in 1974. The logs had rotted, the crew were never found, but carved into the metal hull beneath rust, barnacle, and erosion was a symbol, a hand with an eye, the same symbol found beneath the Coral Sea, the same one traced to Göbekli Tepe, to non-model, to places erased from collective maps, but not from time. A symbol that defies culture, as if drawn not by hands, but by memory itself. In March of 2025, a classified deep-sea submersible launched from Guam under the codename Echo Lantern. Its mission to map tectonic microshifts below the Coral Sea with extreme precision. But less than 5 hours into the descent, the crew made contact with something impossible. Not rock, not wreckage, architecture. They recorded a chamber, oval, tilted, sealed. Inside it, they claimed, was a structure, smooth metallic but patterned like bone. And at the far end of the chamber, a door, closed, breathing, not literally, but with pulses of light every 7 seconds, each pulse dimmer than the last. Then nothing. When the signal returned, the chamber was gone, just seabed, just silence. The team was recovered in full, but their faces were pale, as if they had seen something not meant for eyes, but for the soul. Their official report concluded, "There is no door. There was never a door, and we did not knock." By April, the Coral Sea was no longer a mystery to fringe forums or forgotten academics. It had become the subject of official debate at the United Nations Scientific Coalition for Anomalous Phenomena UNSCEP. The term sounded absurd, until data from over 7 countries showed that magnetic drift, seismic hums, and water density in the Coral Sea had entered anomalous ranges for the first time in recorded history. More telling, bird migration routes had shifted, as if guided not by instinct but avoidance. Whole flocks rerouted. Pods of whales circled the region but never crossed it. Even turtles whose nesting routes remained unchanged for centuries began turning back, as if unwelcome. One marine biologist from Fiji wrote in her private journal, "It's like the sea is telling them not yet. Stay away, I'm not done opening." The deeper question lingers. Not just what is Sandy Island or where it went, but why is it returning now? What chain of events, what cosmic alignment or forgotten ritual has caused this veil to ripple? One hypothesis draws from an unlikely source, the journals of Father Luca Petrolunga, a Jesuit priest who lived in Manila during the Spanish occupation. In 1682, he documented a dream he claimed was sent by an angel with a covered face. In the dream, he saw an island split like a cracked coin, its soul eaten by the waves. He awoke with 3 words etched in ink across his table, though he swore he had not written them. Non locus est. This is not a place. He later wrote, "It is not that the island sank. It is that we rose. And the sea remembers where we should not have been." His writings were dismissed as fever dreams born of tropical illness and isolation. But the phrase returned in 2025 during a Cambridge lecture by geoscientist Dr. Alana Myrek, who revealed a set of seismic tremors beneath the Coral Sea that matched no-plate activity. She described the pattern as artificial echoing tremors bouncing off structures that couldn't possibly exist under miles of sediment. In other words, hollows, cavities in the deep crust, as if something had been removed or was waiting to be inserted. Myrek ended her lecture with a chilling hypothesis. Perhaps it's not a matter of erosion or tectonics. Perhaps the island was never land at all, but a lock, and someone is turning the key. And still no formal government admits anything is amiss. No agencies confirm the data, no warnings are issued. Yet classified memos leaked in fragments suggest preparations. Evacuations rehearsed, airspaces cleared, satellite trajectories shifted, as if expecting an arrival or an unfolding. We stand now at the edge of understanding or illusion. The truth may lie somewhere beneath the fold of the map, beneath the waves we thought we had tamed. And as we trace these forgotten symbols, chase lost islands, decode doors that were never meant to open, we must ask, what if the mystery isn't Sandy Island itself, but the part of ourselves that forgot it was ever real? They say that the ocean holds no memory, that waves wash away every trace. But what if that isn't true? What if the sea remembers better than we do? What if it keeps secrets, not by erasing them, but by folding them beneath its tide? There's a photograph. It sits locked away in the private archives of the New Caledonia Maritime Authority. It's undated, grainy, black and white. At first glance, it shows only an expanse of water, calm, empty. But zoom in, enhance the grain, shift the contrast, and something emerges on the horizon. A line, a ridge, the faint suggestion of land, not a wave, not a cloud. A shape that shouldn't be there, a ghost of a coastline. The photo has no label, no one knows who took it. But penciled faintly on the back, in shaky French script, are 2 words: Elle revient. She returns. By May of 2025, whispers have become ripples. Independent sailors far from news networks and sonar nets begin reporting false land sightings. Sandy outlines, green glows beneath the surface, compass needles drifting for minutes at a time. One fisherman off the Loyalty Islands claimed to hear whispers beneath the hull, not through radio, but through the metal of the boat itself. He said the words weren't French, or English, or any tongue he knew, but he understood them. We are not dead. We are returning. That same month, a Norwegian deep-sea diver named Kaja Thorsen uploaded a video from her personal submersible. The footage is shaky, murky, standard at that depth. But at the 19-minute mark, something appears. Not coral, not rock. Steps, carved into the slope of an underwater ridge. Massive, precise, too symmetrical to be natural. The footage cuts off moments later, static, then black. Her channel was taken down within 48 hours. When questioned, she claimed it was a data retrieval error, but on an archived backup never aired. Her voice can be heard whispering, "It's not Atlantis, it's something older." In the summer of 2025, a private expedition led by tech billionaire Rowan M. Sorrento made headlines when it departed from Sydney with the goal of rediscovering mythological coordinates. He never specified which. But on board were specialists in bathymetry, acoustic imaging, comparative linguistics, and ritual symbology. Not exactly your average oceanographic team. For 3 weeks, they remained radio silent. Then nothing. No mayday, no ping, no trace, until August 19th, when the vessel reappeared, docked silently in Noumea Harbor, untouched, undamaged, empty. Every life vest still aboard, every logbook burned, except one, tucked inside the ship's Bible, a single page, a drawing, a spiral, with eyes at every curve, and one line beneath it, not found, remembered. Governments went quiet, academic circles split. Some cried hoax, others privately requested additional funding. And still the Coral Sea remains still, not stormy, not violent. Just expectant, like a breath drawn in, held too long, waiting for the release. That release came in September when a French satellite captured thermal anomalies at 19 degree 14's 159 degree 56 and the last recorded coordinates of Sandy Island. The ocean was glowing, faintly, like veins beneath the skin of the earth. Not volcanic, not geothermal, but patterned, geometric, a glyph beneath the sea, as if the ocean were pulsing with forgotten code. The satellite malfunctioned hours later, but not before transmitting one final frame. It showed unmistakably a circle of dark emerging within the light, a shadow rising through radiance, and in the shadow's center was the outline of land. Small, angled, impossible. That image never reached the news, but it reached the right inboxes. And one of them belonged to a retired Polynesian linguist named Milo Tavake, who once led a research group on oceanic myth memory, the theory that ancient stories encode actual events from long-lost geography. Tavake had long believed that Sandy Island wasn't a mistake, but a misplaced memory. He claimed the oral histories of Vanuatu and Tonga referenced an invisible land that drowned itself to escape the gods, a land that wasn't destroyed, but veiled, by design, by oath, by fear. In his final journal entry before his disappearance in October, Tavake wrote, "The island isn't lost, it's hiding, and it's no longer hiding well." And so we return to the question we began with. What makes a place vanish? What makes it return? Is it tectonics, shifting maps, cartographic error, or is it belief? Do we unmake places by ceasing to remember them? Do we raise them again, not with science or sonar, but with stories, with questions whispered into the night? What if Sandy Island was never land but a door, and it was never closed, just waiting, waiting for the ones who ask? And now you've asked. The world didn't stop when the images were buried, but something shifted. In the weeks after the satellite anomaly, weather patterns over the Coral Sea began to behave differently. No storms, no cyclones, no wind, just silence. Maritime routes that once buzzed with shipping traffic reported unusual avoidance behaviors. Pilots began manually rerouting around the 159° meridian, not due to policy, but instinct, as though something unseen was pressing at the edges of perception, as if the ocean itself whispered, "Not here, not yet." On October 11th, 2025, researchers at the Australian Institute of Marine Science detected a tremor. It wasn't an earthquake, not exactly. The signal captured at 3 separate undersea stations was short, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. At first they thought it was a malfunction, but each frequency showed the same thing. A pulse, then silence, then another. Measured, purposeful, coming from the very coordinates where Sandy Island had once supposedly existed. And it wasn't the only anomaly. Marine biologists off the coast of New Zealand reported strange patterns among migrating whales. Pods diverting hundreds of miles off course, gathering, circling, as if responding to a call no human could hear. In the town of Luganville on the northern edge of Vanuatu, a priest reported something even stranger. The church bell rang by itself 3 times, always just before dawn, always while the town still slept. When he went to investigate, there was no wind, no movement, but scratched into the bronze surface of the bell was a symbol, a spiral, wrapped in eyes, identical to the one recovered from the Sorrento expedition ship. No one admitted to carving it, and none dared erase it. The phenomenon began to appear in dreams. A team of psychologists from Tokyo studying collective subconscious phenomena launched a quiet survey. What they found was chilling. Dozens of unrelated individuals from across the Pacific Rim described variations of the same dream. An island black with stone, rising from silver waves, an altar of coral, a door with no handle, a language they couldn't read but somehow understood. And always before waking, the same sound. Not thunder, not waves, but breathing, as if the sea itself had lungs. By November 2025, questions began to leak into public discourse. A viral post on an obscure maritime forum claimed to have proof of mass data deletion related to Sandy Island from multiple hydrographic databases, including private logs held by JEBCO, the General Bathymetric Chart of the Oceans. The files weren't deleted, they were corrupted, but only at one node, the node that previously held Sandy Island's registered geocode. Attempts to repair the corruption triggered recursive errors. Like something was fighting back. A whisper began to circulate. The island was never mapped. It mapped us. What does that mean? That question led a team of digital archaeologists from MIT to examine metadata embedded in old naval records. What they discovered defied logic. Coordinates referencing the Sandy Island had timestamps inconsistent with the age of their surrounding documents. Entries dated from 1876, with digital signature markers invented in 1992. Fragments of code embedded where ink should have bled. It was as if someone or something had altered the records from outside time, reaching backward to rewire our perception. A professor in the group, Dr. Elena Grace, wrote in her notebook, "This isn't just a missing island. This is a trauma, erased and still healing." Meanwhile, back in Paris, an independent archivist named Luc Moreau discovered a suppressed reference to La Isla Silencieuse in a 17th century Jesuit letter. Penned by a missionary stationed in Manila, it spoke of a land that visits us in dreams and tides that should not be named. The priest described sailors who went missing and later returned with eyes that wouldn't blink, speaking in symbols rather than words. They drew spirals in the dirt, they refused to eat salt, and they wept when they saw fire. Eventually, they vanished again. Returning, the priest wrote to their silent island, "Why does this matter now? Because our world is changing. We live in an age where we map everything, scan everything, digitize everything. But still a blind spot remains. Sandy Island, that non-place, persists, not on our charts, but in our questions. In the shadow between confirmed and denied, seen and unspoken, it dares us to reconsider what is known, what is real, and what waits for us in the places we forgot to believe in. But perhaps the most disturbing clue came not from sonar, not from code, but from an old woman, a native elder on Espiritu Santo whose name is kept secret in her tribe for protection. She remembers her grandfather speaking of the day of breathless waters. He said the ocean would once again fall still. The wind would die, the birds would vanish, and those who watched long enough would see the veil lift. Beneath it, not just land, but memory itself. She says the island is not a place. It is a story, and stories never die. They just wait to be told again. There is a moment just before sleep when the world is no longer solid, when the hum of the city recedes and the ancient hush of the sea returns. In that space between thought and forgetting, the island still waits. Not on any map, but in the quiet corners of the mind, in the ache of memory unfulfilled. They say there are places the earth remembers even when we do not. Islands that rise for a time only to be swallowed back into myth. But maybe they don't vanish. Maybe they retreat to where our satellites cannot see, to where language fails, to the deep, to the story. And if that's true, if Sandy Island was never made of rock and sand, but of something older, then its disappearance is not erasure, it's invitation. An invitation to look closer, to remember what wonder feels like, to sit with the unknown without needing to control it. The ocean doesn't care for our certainty. It keeps no records, no confessions, only the rhythm of breath and tide. And yet on calm nights, fishermen still glance eastward, toward a gap in the horizon that shouldn't be there. Maybe one day someone will sail through that silence, not looking for riches or fame or answers, but just to listen, to the island, to the sea, to themselves. And maybe they'll return. Or maybe they'll become another echo, a line in a forgotten letter, a blip on a sonar scan, a whisper in a dream. Until then, we wait, not for the island to return, but for us to be ready to see it. Because perhaps the final truth is this: the island didn't vanish. We did. Some stories are not meant to be solved, only remembered. If this journey stirred something in you, a feeling you can't quite explain, a sense that maybe, just maybe, there's more to this world than what we see, then don't let that wonder fade. Subscribe to Unsolved Chronicles. Not for answers, but for the questions that keep us awake at night. For the echoes of lost cities, vanished islands, and the ancient voices still speaking in the dark. Because somewhere, something forgotten is waiting to be found. And the next story might just find you. Remember, some disappearances are meant to be followed.